Good evening. To start our proceedings this evening, I want to call upon Father Chiromba to lead us with a word of prayer. Father Chiromba is a member of the National Transitional Justice Working Group.
As we open with prayer, let us reflect a little on the importance of dialogue, particularly the importance of speech, of being able to talk to one another.
Let me sincerely thank you for coming today and to acknowledge all of you and your presence as our distinguished guests tonight. In a special way, I wish to extend a special welcome to our guests, Dr. Zambara and Dr. Kaulem, who are going to lead our discussions on national dialogue today. Our discussion today is titled The African Transitional Justice Experience, Lessons and Insights for Zimbabwe. Why is this discussion important? The past few years have been dramatic and tragic for Zimbabwe. The November 2017 military coup sent into retirement Zimbabwe's long-term ruler, Robert Mugabe, paving way for the ascension to the throne of his long-term protege, Emmerson Mnangagwa, on 24 November 2017. On 30 July 2018, Zimbabwe held its first post-Mugabe election, which tragically turned bloody when the Zimbabwe National Army gunned down 7 civilians as it tried to clamp down on post-election protests. This led to an international outcry and forced Emmerson Mnangagwa to appoint a 7-member commission of inquiry led by the former president of South Africa, Kgalema Motlanthe. Among other things, the Motlanthe Commission recommended that the process of national dialogue be initiated to deal with deep-seated issues affecting Zimbabwe. A number of initiatives have already started taking shape. The National Peace and Reconciliation Commission, established by Chapter 12 of the Constitution, began the process of consultations aimed at coming up with a national framework for dialogue. On 6 February 2019, President Emmerson Mnangagwa convened a national dialogue meeting at his official residence, which was boycotted by the country's main opposition. In all these supersonic processes, what is lacked is a coordinated, inclusive platform about the rules of the game and the expectations of the general people of Zimbabwe. It is in this context that we have begun this series of dialogue sessions aimed at developing a set of principles, processes, and foundations for an effective and sustainable dialogue from an African experience. The main objectives of the policy dialogue are the following. A, to provide a platform where Zimbabweans can reflect on the dynamics of the process of national dialogue using case studies from other African contexts. B, to produce an evidence-based policy paper on the key principles and foundations for an effective and sustainable national dialogue. This is the second of such a meeting. A similar one was held in Bulawayo And to help us achieve these lofty objectives, allow me to introduce our panel of able presenters. Let us put our hands together as we welcome Dr. Kaulem to make his presentation.
So in your groups, in your tables, could you take 1 minute just discussing what I call the Zimbabwean spirit that was shown in response to Cyclone Eli. Let's clap hands for ourselves. Because the spirit is there. I don't know how to describe it, but it is there. You can touch it. Think of the historical moment of independence as the Zimbabwean flag was being hoisted. Remember? Those who were there. Think of that time. There were people who had jobs, big jobs in the UN and all over the place. Because of that spirit, they came back. They gave up a lot and they came back. The spirit is there. Now, I want to emphasize this because this spirit can be the cement of our universe. It can be the glue that holds our country together. For it to be sustainable, it has to be a spirit which is all-inclusive, which respects the dignity of everyone, and which is focused on cultivating the common good. If we were to conduct elections in Chimanimani in 2 years' time, do you think that those elections will be peaceful? Do you think that the Zimbabwean spirit that we saw in the last 3 weeks or so will be self-evident in 2 years' time during elections? So I want to emphasize this spirit as the value that is missing in our dialogues. So we heard that since the Monshante Commission, the call for national dialogue has grown. Many stakeholders, civil society, business, the churches, and the international community supporting this idea of national dialogue. And we also heard about the different efforts that have been made towards that, including the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission itself, the National Dialogue meeting held by the President, Mnangagwa, at the State House, and the the ZCC National Leaders Breakfast meeting that was held. These were held as national events, and yet they proved to be less than truly national. They demonstrate how complex the conditions for national dialogue are. They illustrate the following points about Zimbabwe. First, the national dialogues are useful in cultivating the necessary virtues for engagement and dialogue. So they are not useless, but they have not been comprehensive. But they are places where virtues, by the way, virtues are those qualities of humanity that we want to cultivate, that will be able for us to be worthy of dialogue. Secondly, while these dialogues are less than complete, they also demonstrate the limitations that come out of these deep-seated historical issues that need to be dealt with in the long term in order for us to be truly having national dialogues. Since 1890, we have learned how to fight, how to destroy, how to divide. That's our experience, our social experience. That's why it's very difficult. So we need to have platforms for learning how to dialogue. What we need is a spirit that brings us together in order to pull in one direction without ignoring the real debates we must have.
When the coup happened, I was here working with the National Peace and Reconciliation Commission. I'm happy my sister, Patience Chiraza, Commissioner Patience Chiraza is here. So when former President Mugabe resigned, I was showing some colleagues places and we were so close to Parliament, and suddenly a street party came. But one young man came to me, and he was very frank. He said, "My brother, I don't even think in 1980 we were as happy as what we are feeling now." Then, to me, I still remember that vividly. He's young, say in his early 20s, and to him, he never wanted to know what I felt in 1980, even though I was 7 years old, but I recall. But he had concluded that you were not as happy as what we are now. Prof. Cowden talked of intergenerational dialogue, right? That's when I came face to face with the lack of intergenerational dialogue in Zimbabwe. That there's some communication that has been missed, where those that are old and know, and obviously they are coming to the end of their political lives as well as their biological lives. What is it that they want the younger generation to know, so that when they go out, they will rest in peace? And I got an answer 3 years ago when I interacted with former President Chissano, Joaquim Chissano of Mozambique. We asked him, President, by then President Mugabe was still in power, we would always ask, are you not talking to your colleague? Then they said, don't worry, we are trying. Then I asked, what is it that you feel you could have done differently? And he said, no. I feel that as the liberation movement, we should have groomed young people, and he told them that when we went into war, we wanted Mozambique to get there, and we would sit and say, take Mozambique to that place. The very essence of the liberation struggle is lost because the younger generation doesn't even relate to it anymore. That's dangerous. So what is my key message today? Perhaps my thesis if we would be in a university. My thesis is that you do not start dialogue because you are in a crisis. You get into a crisis because you do not dialogue. This country, with the vast natural and human resources, regardless of whoever is in power, this country should thrive. And I think a national dialogue is one such enabler that will enable us to deal with many other issues, including transitional justice.
We can ask questions to the two presenters. We can comment, and we'll move on like that.
Thank you. The name is Briggs. I am Briggs Bomba. I'm with Trust Africa. I also convene a citizen movement called Citizens Manifesto. I'm also the convener of the Citizens Cabinet. We've tried to put out a proposition that says as citizens, our responsibility goes beyond pointing out the challenges and the problems that we face as a country, and extends, most importantly, to proffering solutions. So we've called ourselves a generation of solutions. So I want to thank the presenters for, I think, a very refreshing take on our situation. What I find most refreshing is the objectivity with which you have tackled this issue. I think one of our biggest challenges as a country presently, as you have rightly identified, is the lack of social cohesion, is the divisions that we have as a country. And objectivity is the first victim or the first casualty when a country is as divided as we have become. Truth, does not have a space. So I really found your presentations very refreshing in that regard. You both spoke of dialogue as a process. So what I wanted to throw in is that maybe for your comments later, is to consider it as processes. Dialogue actually is multiple processes. Because if you look at the AU framework, when a country is in conflict, the standard approach that the AU is taking, and I'm putting it out because I think it's very relevant to our conversation tonight, is it's a four-part strategy. The first thing is cessation of hostilities. And if you look at our context, that may be relevant. But secondly, you have an element around disarmament, demobilization, and reintegration. And thirdly, you have political settlement. And fourthly, and separate from political settlement, you have a component on the long-term systemic reforms that a country needs to take on board so that it moves forward. So I think in our context, we have confused matters because we have taken a dialogue to be a single process. So a political negotiation can actually be the one and all process that even represents dialogue. I was at the National Leaders Press Breakfast where my brother Nelson said, we can find the nearest room, me and ED goes in there and national dialogue starts. And ED himself had already called leaders to State House to say, let's start a national dialogue. So I think we are confusing matters and we are trying to force matters to be one process. If you look at these four elements that I've outlined, political settlement, which is the third component, it has its place and it's important. So you can look at it and we don't even know what outcome can come from it. But the fourth aspect to me is the most important, which is how do you deal with the systemic challenges and how it can include constitutional reform, it can include building new institutions, things that can enable us to really transform our society and be able to move forward. So I'm putting that out for you to comment on my comment. It's not a very specific question to any of you. It's just an invitation for you to comment on that comment. But thank you for your objectivity. I think it is the historical task of the middle class or the elites in this country is to be able to speak the truth. Because for the most part, if you are on, I'm coming from Chimanimani. If you are so desperate for one bag of maize seed, we should not expect you to have the same level of objectivity that you guys have demonstrated today. So, Comrade Chairman, thank you.
I think that from my presentation, I did acknowledge that there are many processes, not only economic, but political, but cultural, and over a long period of time. We could go through different important events in our history, which indicates, some of the problems that we have within us today. So a lot of them are about the things in our heads that have been developed over long periods of time, about the conceptual frameworks that we have developed over long periods of time. The other thing is about emotional cultivation, our emotional responses, which have been cultivated over long periods of time. And it's very complex because in some of these engagements, social, political, economic engagements, victims become perpetrators, perpetrators become victims. So it's very complex. And I accept your proposition that there is multiple processes which then demand multiple processes and institutions and time.
I have gone through a process of reflection, and I want to preface this by saying, when I say I and we, I might be talking about opposition forces. So let's start there. I think at some point there needed to be a realization as to why is the dialogue not happening, and your presentation seemed to look at the past and the present as to what happened in the past and how is the present created and constituted that is an impediment to dialogue. In my honest opinion, I think our fears of the future are the ones that are an impediment to dialogue. I want your comment on this. In my opinion, the present is constituted by those in power and those who do not have power. And their interests about what they want the future to have is diametrically opposed. Those in power do not want to be held accountable for the things that they did and want to steer ahead the process of getting to the future and want to be given credit for that to happen. This is diametrically opposed to those who are not in power, who want those in power to be held accountable for their actions, who want to be part of the process that spearheads Zimbabwe into correct direction, and who want to be given credit for that. Unfortunately, these two things are diametrically opposed. And by those in power, I mean politically, Zambia, I mean culturally, I mean men, I mean churches, I mean on race, I mean on every possible division that exists. This fear holds. And maybe to support you, I think your presentation as us in opposition to then ask the question, are we willing to let go of receiving credit and being part of a process of dialogue if it means Zimbabwe is going to be better? Okay.
I have two questions, basically. The first one is on intergenerational leadership, and I'm directing it to Dr. Webster. As a young person, I am concerned about that kind of dialogue, especially in a context like Zimbabwe, where there are several factors really that impede dialogue in this nation. The first one I'd like to point out is the concept of liberation credentials, where the older generation feel like we fought the liberation war, we were there in the bush and we did X and Y for Zimbabwe. The second one is oppression through the use of oppressive state apparatuses. We have seen how the military wreaked havoc on the streets during the time of post-election violence. And then the culture of fear. It's a culture of fear in Zimbabwe where you don't challenge elders. You don't even think about it, because if you try, X and Y will happen. So how do young people like me and many other of my friends begin to dialogue with elders when some oppressive aspects of our African culture will say, you don't stop when an elder is talking, you should sit down and listen. So how do I begin to talk to Baba Mokuro and Sekulu? And I don't see that really feasible in this context.
Our challenges of intergenerational, lack of intergenerational, I wouldn't say, is the fear that comes again. Men and older men fear that if women would become powerful, they may do what we used to do to them. And the older men who have not been working closely with the younger generation would fear that if we make them powerful now, they may do what we did to them, to us. So they end up holding on. That is why we need a dialogue now. That what you did for the country is important. And what we want to do will make your life even better. Is it? There's this thing that it's good to be poor as long as I fought the war. No! You fought the war, we thank you. But we can do things better so that you enjoy the fruits of having fought in that war. But that dialogue does not take place.
And I was just following on some of the conditions that both presenters laid out. And there was one critical condition that there must be an agreed agenda. But what I didn't get from the subsequent analysis is who should set that agenda. I think it's very critical. I will pose it back to the presenters to clarify on that. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Feicho. I wanted to pick on the point which was made by Briggs, that is, what's the system? what system did we inherit and what system did we create, and how can we affect that system? And maybe I can give an example. When my daughter went to school at the age of 5, she had already read 40 books. And in her class, there were children who'd never seen a book and never held a pencil. So she was very advantaged, and some of us are very advantaged, whereas we still find 70% of our population are totally penniless. They can never see a bond note or a bond coin. And when they want to pay their school fees, they take their chicken there or their goat. I think we need to discuss the system which we inherited and which we created. So it's not just about how good I am as an individual, but what are the values of the society? Thank you.
So who is making the agenda? I think there was a point which we made last time, that the goal, I think Webster mentioned, the goal that we have should also be reflected in the process that we are having. One of the challenges that we have, especially when we look at our background in the liberation struggle, we used to say that, maybe Fei Chung could confirm or challenge my analysis, a lot of social justice issues were packed. We used to say, no, the women's issue, let's wait until we are independent. The youth issue, let's wait until, we will solve all these things when we are independent. So the idea was, the goal is more important than the process itself. And I think one of the lessons that we must take from this experience is that if we ignore certain things in the process, we will not be able to achieve them as a goal. So it is important for us, the dialogue must be a subject of dialogue. And in terms of who is going to make the agenda, it should be an issue for dialogue. And we must reach a consensus in terms of that dialogue. Dr. Fei Chung, the systems. What is the system? I think it's important to appreciate the system and how the system constructs us and how it is facilitating or even undermining the things. I think we could talk about the enclave economy, this jewel that Julius Nyerere talked about. It's a flawed jewel because it functioned, perfectly for a few people. So the challenge, and I feel a lot for Mugabe, and for the first government in 1980, the challenge you had was how do you appreciate the efficiency and so on and so forth of this system, but opening up to the majority of the people. So I think that when we think about the system, it is important, but at the same time, the virtues of leadership, the virtues of how we engage one another. So I take seriously the idea that human beings are important and how they grow up is important in order for us to be able to tackle that system.
My name is Senele. I'm with the Zimbabwe Peace Project. Thank you very much, presenters, for the intriguing information that you've just given us. Following your presentation earlier around the issues of the key ingredients towards building a national dialogue, I would have also loved to hear your take on issues of trust and confidence because of the institutions that we have in Zimbabwe. We may have good-looking institutions as outlined in our constitution, but do we trust them as citizens? Do we have confidence in their ability to deliver? That has been a debate that has been going on. And then also, My second comment is around how do we speak truth to power? How do you convince, in my local language, I would say, how do you ask an elder to smell their armpits and be humble so that you can engage in meaningful dialogue that is not cosmetic, but that is actually ingrained in the value of wanting to change and wanting to actively listen? Thank you.
Senele, trust. I was hoping that some of the characteristics that I indicated that are important would have talked to your question. I was hoping, obviously they didn't. Because I was hoping that before we even engage one another, what is the spirit within which we have? Because it is, if in a family, if the spirit is right, young people can actually criticize old people. It is possible. So the spirit is very important for us to be able to do this. I think that in Zimbabwe we are losing space for the spirit, even in our educational system. Now we are trying to ban philosophy and theology and literature and these subjects, because now we are going science. We don't have to think about ideas and how we engage one another. I think it's tragic. I think it's tragic. The reason why we are where we are now is precisely because we've undermined spaces for discussing these value issues, these spiritual issues. And that's why dialogue will not happen well if the spirit is not right. So I'm hoping that trust and confidence and speaking truth to power can be informed if we can really think about how we can cultivate this wide sense of history, this special attention to the impoverished, and also respecting all humanity to participate. And of course, I talked a lot about humility, because it is in cultivating humility that we are able to build that trust. For as long as people feel so tense about being criticized, it means they are not free. They don't have confidence. They don't trust.
The question that you have is that how do we transform antagonism into accommodation? The two sides that are the two forces that we have, the major at the political point. You have ZANU-PF defending the liberation efforts, the values, the virtues of the liberation. And you have MDC on the other hand coming in with a new way of doing things. And MDC is seen as a threat to the liberation. And ZANU-PF is seen as a threat to the new way of doing things. And you still find the binary mentality in that MDC is not willing to get things better, because their view is that, look, if we come onto the table and we complement this issue and Zimbabwe becomes a better country, we will not get the credit.
Is that true?
ZANU-PF would believe on the other way, that if we let go of the situation the way it is, we are on the losing side. So you find that everybody in one way or the other is winning at the expense now of the statistic that has been brought by Fei Chung, that 76%, actually when you look at these Zimbabwe figures, that 76% of the population is living in poverty. So it is 76% that is actually suffering at the expense of the elite. And the issue is, I think, it's not really a question. You can bring in your contribution in as much as you would find it useful. Thank you.
Guys, my name is Dadiraj Kogete. I'm from Harare Jesuit University. My question is, how do we include women in the formulation of this national dialogue? How do we volunteer? What should we do to make our presence felt and known in Zimbabwe? Thank you.
Last year I was lucky to be in the group of experts in courts. I don't usually like that. That prepared the UN Secretary General's report on the meaningful participation of women in negotiations and peacemaking. So the report is now there. It was launched in October. And research that is now there show us that there is a 30% chance that a peace agreement will survive more than 15 years if women are included in the process of peacemaking. And some of the things that men think they are very special, women have done it all along. They know it very well. Only that they've not been given platforms to say, this is how we can do it. So, if we are to have a national dialogue process, I think the easiest thing is to ask women, what do you want? When you change women, you have changed society.
Including women. Look, I can't say that how you women can participate. I think it's up to you. I think that we can collaborate about creating the environment in which we respect, and I think Webster had begun, interrogating some of our traditional and our modern institutions which undermine women. We can collaborate on that, but we need leadership from women to help us appreciate how women can participate.
I hesitate now to call this a national dialogue. It appears to me from the presentations that we still need to define the ingredients of a national dialogue. But as part of the national dialogue processes, I think this really qualifies. So I thank us all for making time and for persevering until now, after a full day's work, but we are still here, so thank you very much. Let me thank our facilitators. I think they did a very good job in raising the issues that need to be addressed. Let me also thank the officials from the MPRC who are here. I had mention of some names, the commissioners. From some brief conversations with them, I know they have some answers to some of the questions we were raising, even some of the issues. But well, it is important for ownership that we all participate, in this preparation. I know the NPRC has been preparing now for some time, and our presenters mentioned, the importance of that period of incubation. And really, they are preparing. I hope when they publicize their dialogue framework that we'll all be able to identify with it. Let me conclude by thanking our facilitator, Mr. Mchadi Hama, for doing a good job, and naturally those who funded, this dialogue this evening. Thank you very much.